I'm going to basically, as the kids call it, freeball this one. A lot of thrust. Like, this thing should go, as they say, like a bat out of hell. Prograde marker. Oh god. Oh, no, 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 no! Hello everyone and welcome back to that one playthrough of Kerbal Space Program. I am Kyle once again, and you find us observing a little satellite in which you have never seen before. Yes, this little guy is the OMOS, or Orbital Moon Altimetry Scanner. Specifically, this was put in place to do an altimetry scan of said moon. All I really had to do was take one of the original satellites we've been using as a relay satellite, and I replaced the relay dish with an altimetry scanning dish. Now, this led to a couple positives, but one very, very, very detrimental con. The pros were that we literally just had to duplicate the rocket and the actual probe core and everything that was built around it from those relay satellites. But in replacing that relay dish with the altimetry scan device, I realized far too late into the launch and trajectory towards moon that we actually don't have any sort of communications device. Specifically, this thing came from low Kerbin orbit, where it was in a parking orbit, and I was able to send it on its way to the moon. But then as it left the close proximity of Kerbin and those easy access to ground stations for communications, it actually became impossible to control. And so it will do a flyby of the moon, as seen by this specific trajectory here. However, when it gets close, I will have no way to control it to actually get it in the right trajectory so that we can do this burn. And because I don't have any control, everything is locked and I cannot even build a maneuver node. So, this kind of feels like one of those great moments in history where the scientists back home have to figure out a way to gain control of their satellites so that we don't lose this mission. This probe will have its encounter with the moon in approximately 36, almost 37 minutes. We do have the Edison one though. This was the first little relay satellite that we actually put into orbit around the moon. Now the reason this little guy is quite interesting is because this actually has over 900 meters per second of remaining delta V, which means I can alter the orbit of this pretty drastically. So we're gonna do a couple of quick kind of napkin calculations. I am not a scientist nor an orbital mechanics specialist in any way, shape, or form. I'm going to basically, as the kids call it, freeball this one. Okay, so looking back specifically at the OMOS satellite, or probe I should say. It's a probe at the moment. It'll be a satellite once it's in orbit of said moon. All right, so we're gonna go back to the OMOS. We're gonna focus our view on the moon because I wanna see timing-wise. This says 8 hours, 8 minutes until we are at our closest proximity at moon periapsis. So we'll use that as kind of our time frame. Now I can't create another node at all, but I can click on the actual path and see at which points we're going to be at certain time frames from now. So 7 hours 47. We're going to be kind of in, I want to see when we approach the same plane as the Edison 1, and that's going to be at 8 hours 42 minutes. So 8 hours and 42 minutes is our time frame to get the Edison to line up as close to this portion, I think, as possible, because that will be the closest flyby. So we're going to change the orbit of the Edison and see if we can get the timing to, you know, pull off some magic here. All right, 8 hours 42 minutes. That's not the time frame in which we have to complete this maneuver. That's the time frame we got to line up the orbit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flash forward ahead just a little bit until the OMOS actually enters that sphere of influence of the moon, so we need to get that change. So we're going to speed up, speed up, speed up, speed up. There it is. So the OMOS is now showing its trajectory past the moon, and what I should have done was paid attention to how much time we have left, actually. That I did not consider. Hold on, we got to recheck. We got to go check the OMOS again, because the time frames have shifted. That is happening at 7 hours 46 minutes from now. Still cannot add maneuver. Okay, so 7 hours 46 minutes from, well, this is the time frame of the mission. I need to know the actual time frame of like our game time. Oh, here we go. Year, day. Okay, so this is actually good because we're at a 040. So if we have to get an additional 755 or 756 roughly, that's going to be 835. When this hits 835 is the goal. All right, I've actually just set a manual alarm. That was the smarter thing to do. I don't know why I didn't do that from the start. Okay, let's line up this satellite retrogrades because we're going to try and shorten up this orbit here a little bit. So let's go ahead and burn this. And the idea would try and get it to pass by the trajectory of the OMOS as it flies by the moon. We also want to be really careful because we do want to conserve some of the delta V here in case we make mistakes. And I actually look like I went a little too far inside of that. Okay, but we're going to hit that point at 4 hours 32 minutes, which means we're going to hit the point closest to this trajectory at 5:39, or in 5:39 I should say. So what I need to do is get this point to where I create, whatever I click on it, this is equal to 7 hours and now 53 minutes. Because the idea here, if you're not catching on to what I'm thinking, this is a relay satellite. It has a strong connection directly to Kerbin, as you can see by the green lines. If I can get its orbit to line up as close as possible to where the OMOS is going to do its flyby, it might be able to give a connection to it. Even though the OMOS doesn't actually have an antenna on it. It does have a probe core that has very, very short range communications. We might be able to take advantage of that. Or this could fail catastrophically, I don't know. Okay, so I need to increase the time frame. So I need to increase the orbit of this, which means we go prograde and then out away from the planet, or not the planet, the moon. It's a moon, not a planet. We burn this way. We're going to make it so that the orbit is more, or the apoapsis is actually further away from that low point where the OMOS is going to pass by. So I'm just going to burn this hard. Okay, here we go. We're getting somewhere because the periapsis is now 7 hours, which means this point right here, we're at 756. That's actually really dang close. But we are going to need to expand that way slightly. So maybe I should go back the other way. That is actually pretty dang close. And it's in 7:35. It's going to be 15 minutes before the OMOS is at about that point. I'm going to burn a little bit more the other way again. Okay, that's pretty close there in terms of time frame. Now what my goal I think I'm going to do is when I get to this end, or here, I'm going to add a maneuver here. Let's burn that out slightly. Like that, and then I can do another node here, and that's 8 hours 1 minute. That's a little bit too far. 754, 749 is what our clock is at now. I'm gonna keep that maneuver node. We're gonna use that. So we'll speed time warp up to there, not go too far. All right, this is a very small burn. We're gonna get into position, speed it up just a little bit again so we get to the point where that node is at. T-minus 50 seconds. T-minus 10. Okay, let's go ahead and just subtly put some gas on this. It's not going to take very much. Let off the pedal right there. Okay. So at that point in the orbit, we are 4 hours, 50 minutes away. Our time frame for when the OMOS gets there is 4:46. We're looking at about 5 minutes off. 51, yeah, maybe six minutes off or so. These should be in pretty close proximity, I would think, when we get to that point. And we're just gonna see what happens. So we'll speed up. We can see the OMOS coming in now. And there it is, actually. We've got the contact. So let's go ahead and switch over. This is working out perfectly. Holy moly, I can't believe this little maneuver actually worked. And yeah, just like that, we've actually got really, really good strength control. So this is gonna be way easier than I even expected it to be. See, this is why it's important to have a relay network in place. We're not even at periapsis yet, so we're still approaching the best spot to even do this burn. It's gonna be super efficient. I'm gonna make this pretty low, actually, because I don't know what the optimal height is to run this altimetry scan. So we'll kind of check the actual experiment piece to see where it says is the most optimal point as it's orbiting. We got minute 8-second burn time on this. So we'll start it in less than 20 seconds. And at 34, T minus 34, ready and burn. Oh, this is still in the operating with half of the engines. I had shut down half of them to do a little bit more finite maneuvering, but that's okay. This will still be able to get into orbit very comfortably. Oh, I am so happy that this worked though. What I should probably do is shorten the overall orbit period of that relay satellite so it's constantly in a much tighter radii, and that way it'll have probably more consistent contact with this science probe. Lucky for us. Oh my goodness, I'm so happy. It was almost going to be a completely wasted mission. And honestly, I didn't get footage of the initial launch, so I could have just disbanded it and just pretended like it never happened, but this made for a really exciting little correction to the mission. We'll go ahead and stop it there. Now, the question is, on this scanner, it is scanning. Okay, go ahead and open this and see. We'll need to speed up the orbit period a little bit, or not the period itself, but just speed up the game so that we can start to watch some data get collected. Oh, we're approaching our time stamp that we put on for when that's going to have the close flyby. Okay, so actually there is the scanning icon. There was an altitude at which it started though, so it looks like if we're too high, it won't work, and if we're too low, then we just get a really small distance. It doesn't scan as efficiently, so we want to find that optimal zone where it's scanning a wider field, but then it's also actually working. Altitude is 172 above terrain, kilometers, I should say. See when this shuts off. 300, it's still going. And it shut off about 375. So there's two things to keep in mind here. The higher it is, the wider the field of the actual sensors are, so it gets a little bit wider field. And you can see on the actual map here, we're not getting a huge benefit by having it wider, actually. Let's see. Celestial body, we need to go moon. And if it's lower, it's going to do more orbits, meaning that we'll collect data faster. So it's probably going to be better that this thing stays fairly low. So I'm going to raise the periapsis just a smidge when we get to apoapsis. So we'll go prograde. And I'm going to bring this up to about 100 kilometers. Just like so. And then when we get down to periapsis, we will move the apoapsis down to about the same altitude. We can keep the spacecraft oriented the same way so that we are prograde this time. Go ahead and just do a hard full throttle burn. And when this gets up here down to 100, we'll shut her down. 200, 150. Good. We'll do a nice slow burn just to circularize. Right about there is good. 102 by 99.7. I like where we're at. Perfect. Okay, the OMAS is on its way doing its primary objective. And where this is at right now, it's actually still getting a connection from this other satellite, so I'm not even that worried about adjusting the Edison 1 at all. Go ahead and call this a successful placement of the OMAS, and as long as it doesn't have any failures, it should continue on its way, collecting the altimetry data of the moon. And we'll visit that in a little bit. We do have the contract for that, which is to get up to at least 75% completion. So in due time, maybe not this episode, we will get that taken care of. We'll get to some scientific data from it as well as some moolah. And yes, I know, more planes. The Bumblebee returns once again, this time to fulfill a very, very easy mission that will take us literally just to do a small loop here. All we have to do is fly a vehicle, I believe, to 2,500 meters. So very easy to do in this spacecraft, or not spacecraft, this aeroplane. We're already at 1,200 meters. Be pretty easy to get there, just had to do it. Quick contract completion, we'll go turn around and land the Bumblebee right after. This thing has done this a million times, but nice easy contract to complete. And we're already almost there. So nice and easy one. I've got Valentina in the cockpit again. Switching off between her and Jebs just so they each get some experience. And there it is, contract completed. Gonna go ahead and just shut down the engines. And just like that, easy 8,000 credits to science. That's pretty cool. And then 3 reputation will always help. Now, if you're not aware, reputation in the game is really, really valuable. I know a lot of times it gets overlooked, but essentially the higher your reputation is, the more value there is in the contracts that'll get offered. So if you work hard at increasing your reputation, over time your contracts become worth more and more and more over time as well. It's not just something that naturally scales with the game. If you lose reputation, you'll actually lose value in contracts as well. And we'll just do a nice easy descent here, easy turn back toward the runway. Do this like we have done so many times before. It's nice that I don't even have to rebuild new planes for each of these contracts. I can just reuse a craft that has been flight proven. Makes things a lot easier. Easy cash. That's really the only reason I did that. This has taken 3 minutes thus far, so nice easy short mission for some quick money, some reputation, and some bonus science. And to help get more value out of this returned vehicle, I'm going to try and put it down right on the runway. Coming in with a pretty shallow trajectory right on the end of the runway here, just like so. And I'm just going to let it coast out here a little bit. Lightly apply the brakes. Look at that. This is our best descent and landing thus far. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and lock them in place. And should be way better than the previous ones. I made sure that the brakes were only at 50% this time, so we don't have any of those catastrophically terrible looking spin out 360s at the end of the runway. Alright, so Valentina's home safe, and we've got a little bit of extra cash again. And for quick reference, when I recovered that vehicle, I recovered it directly to the spaceplane hangar. So if I click on this on Kerbal construction time, I'll see that exact Bumblebee 3 just sitting here. It's still being recovered from the runway, essentially, I guess. But as soon as that's recovered, and I'll go ahead and flash forward to that point, it's just going to stay here in the storage, so I can launch it and refly it literally whenever I want. Don't have to worry about repurchasing, don't have to worry about rebuying. The plane exists, and the only reason I recovered it in this fashion this time is because there was no failures. Alright, and as we know from the last episode, we have quite a bit of struggles trying to figure out some introductory manned vehicles that we're going to try and put Kerbals on. But I have been having heavy rocketry here researching, and I think it's about time I just stop fiddling around and let this actually finish without trying to complete too many extra contracts. And the reason I want to let this completely finish doing its research is because this is going to substantially help our lifting vehicle, our first stage entirely, because the researched engines that are a part of heavy rocketry are going to really help us increase our total payload size. And that has 2 benefits. One, we'll be able to lift larger vehicles into low Kerbin orbit, meaning those vehicles that we want to attach command pods to and actually have Kerbals inside of, but then also it means larger probes that are going to go to exterior bodies. Now, the other added benefit here actually is that we've completed our contract by waiting that time to do the altimetry scan of the moon, which was worth 99,000 Kerbal dollars. The other thing we can do is very quickly go over and transmit that science. So we head back over to the OMAS, and we're going to analyze the radar data, which I believe is complete. Let's just verify. I want to make sure it says, yep, 100% complete. So let's go ahead and transmit this. We do have a radio signal. Whether or not we have enough battery to do this all in one shot, I do not know. Oh, I didn't even think about this. We have the ability to control the probe, but because we have no actual communications device, we can't send or transmit data. That's a really big bummer, because this is 16 science, which isn't, you know, a game changer, but it's definitely a little dent. Alright, well, nonetheless, contract completed. Maybe we'll send a mission one day to have a Kerbal enter the same orbit rendezvous at this and collect that data for future generations. And as we also well know, we currently have a strategy in place to collect science from 3 different biomes on the surface of the moon. Now, what I decided to do was, why not just create multiple probes, put them on the same vehicle, send them all at once. So that's what you're looking at right here. There's one spire down the middle with a satellite piece that will just end up orbiting the moon as a continuous relay, and then there are 4 landing probes attached to this. Obviously we only need to do 3 of them, but I figured why not carry a 4th with me since I'm going to be going there. That way if one fails, we have at least one backup. It also means we can collect 4 different biomes worth of science, which is just more science, and that's good in the long run too. Each one of these has, I believe, 1 mystery goo, 1 thermometer, 1 barometer, and a seismometer, so they're pretty expensive overall. You'll notice that I've overall got the whole system in place, fuel tanks, everything. This should get it to the moon, get into an orbit, and then from there be able to land. And in order to send a vehicle that's going to have enough probes to do all those contracts at once, I'm going to need a larger fairing. And right now I only have the tiny 0.625 meter fairing, which isn't going to quite cut it. What I'm going to need is this one right over here. The Airstream Protective Shell 1.25 at least. I'm hoping that'll still be enough. But in order to get that, I'm going to need 45 science, and right now I have 16.9. Now there's a couple of ways to do that. One would be to complete some of these contracts that actually have us go and collect science that we're not quite finished collecting, so I'm going to do that. Now the second method in which we're going to get science might not be obvious just quite yet. The first thing we got to do is a simple engine test of the Kodiaks, which are the new ones that we just got after the last batch of research. So we're going to go ahead and fire these bad boys up. Oh yeah, burn baby burn. They are very quiet actually. We don't really have to let these things burn out completely, but I thought it would be nice to just kind of do so to say that we tested them completely. And then we're going to actually use these exact engines in a vehicle right now, so I hope you're ready. Grab a cup of whatever your favorite beverage is, because things are about to get crazy. And there was a very specific reason why we tested these engines, so we could use them immediately on a brand new vehicle. I present to you the Bravery One. Why the Bravery One? Well, it's gonna take a lot of bravery to actually convince anyone to ride this, because while we have tested a lot of these parts, you may notice down in the corner, it's happening, people. We're putting a Kerbal on this bad boy, and we're gonna send one into space. So without further ado, we're gonna get this bad boy fired up. With Jebediah on board, we should have plenty of SAS control. This has no gimbaling engines on the bottom of the Kodiaks, but I attached 4 twitches down there. So let's go ahead and fire this up, make sure all of our engines are active, and then we'll release the launch clamps. This has a lot of thrust, and I mean a lot of thrust. Like, this thing should go, as they say, like a bat out of hell. We're going to start to get a little bit of a gravity turn going, not too much, because this thing is probably not the most stable spear pointed up toward the sky. So I'm going to have to do a pretty good job here of piloting to make sure we stay inside of our prograde marker. Oh god. Oh, no. It's okay. It's okay. We have a launch escape system. We have a launch escape system. Jebediah will get out of here. Alright, well, let's go ahead and detach that, and then we can deploy our parachute. I guess the Bravery One was actually a pretty good name for this thing. There it goes. Jebediah, I'm sorry you're not going to space, but the good news is we know the launch escape system works. Alright, I feel like we've seen this image before. Let's go back to the drawing board one simple time more. All we should have to do is add some fins, and this thing should be completely 100% a-okay. Okay, the Bravery Mark II is a go, with literally the only difference being it has some fins. Fire up these engines. And release the clamps. Should have a lot more basic control on this bad boy. Let's let it get to a decent altitude. I'm going to reduce the thrust just ever so slightly because this thing's really powerful. And you notice we don't have Kerbal Engineer active because I didn't put one on this vehicle. And we don't have an actual Kerbal who's an engineer. Oh, this thing likes to wobble. This is going to be a little bit on the not so fun side. It's going to make it a little bit interesting here, folks. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and increase thrust all the way again. And let's go ahead, get rid of SAS so that the fins, nope, put it back on. I don't know why that was the thing that happened. Okay, let's continue right where we left off. Come on, Jeb, you can do this. I believe in you. I believe in you, Jeb. You can do this. It's veering slightly to the right. I don't care if we hit a perfect equatorial orbit with this. The biggest thing here, there's 2 sides to this. One, I want to put a Kerbal into space. I don't care if he makes it to orbit. If this ends up being a suborbital flight, that is okay. That's still a win in our book because we're testing this vehicle's capability of coming back, as well as Alright, we're losing some of the atmospheric pressure now, which is good. So control has gotten a lot easier. I'm going to go ahead and take this a lot more severe of an angle, because we got quite a bit of speed going up, and I would like us to start moving more laterally. And I would imagine that our apoapsis is actually pretty good. Let's get rid of that top section, that launch escape system. And then this next portion, quite honestly, I don't know if it has enough thrust. Yeah, we've got an apoapsis of over 200 kilometers. So we can probably take this pretty dang horizontal. Yeah, not a lot of thrust on this at all. Probably should have done 2 more twitches rather than 2 ants. I did the ants just so there was gimbal control. Because we know the pug is, well, it's a pretty decent... Well, it's a pretty decent vacuum engine. It really just does not have the thrust. Okay, we do want to perform, I think, a materials study, but I think I have a contract for extra science. Okay, leftover science, mystery goo, and materials study, flying low. Flying, oh, these are flying. These aren't even in space. So I need a plane to do these. Alright, so these don't apply. That's good to know. Thank you. You do have some scrap failures. What is this? Launch escape system failed. Launch escape system suffered an ignition failure. Well, apparently when I fired the launch escape system originally, it didn't actually fire. It just disconnected me from the rocket. But Jebediah ended up okay. So we're just going to consider it a win still, I guess. Alright, I'm going to start orienting this still toward the prograde marker because I am afraid that due to the low thrust of this thing, it might not get us exactly where we want to go unless we keep ourselves in a high enough altitude long enough. Let's go ahead and conduct the materials study. And then, yeah, go ahead and keep that. We'll have Jebediah grab it. I think he can do an EVA. I'm not sure. I didn't check if I had the proper upgrades for that. This could be bad. Alright, let's go ahead and do a materials study as well. I don't know if I need this one. Yep, there's a little bit. 1.2. So this will help us get that extra science that we need in order to get that upgraded fairing. And then as far as getting to orbit, I don't think it's going to happen, to be honest. I'm looking at the remaining Delta V and what we're going to need for orbit. It's like 3,600. I think we're going to be a bit short if it's 36. If it's 34, there's a chance? Maybe? Yeah, not really sure it's going to happen. Let's go ahead and kill the engines. And at the very least, let's do a quick calculation with a maneuver node. Get that right about 83, that's good. Yeah, we're going to be short. We'll be short quite a bit, actually. So Jebediah will not make it to orbit. But he is technically the first Kerbal in space, which is pretty dang cool. So what I'm going to do is we're just going to burn the rest of our fuel horizontally so that he gets a little bit longer duration flight. We'll have him stick it out there. And then once this thing completely burns out, we will have him do an EVA. Can it disembark while Kerbin service? Ah, I was right. I did need to do another upgrade. So we need to actually upgrade the astronaut complex before we can do that. But he can do a crew report up here, which is something we've never done. And that is worth 4 science. Look at that. I do have a little antenna in here, so... nope, cancel. Let's just extend. So we got that there, which means I won't actually be able to ditch any of this science now that I think about it. None of this is transmissible, and I can't have him get out. Well, crap. Well, at the very least, we can take a look around inside the cockpit. This is Jebediah's view. He is the first Kerbal to actively be able to see outside of a window in a vehicle that is high above the atmosphere, which is pretty dang cool. So yeah, that's a lifelong experience in and of itself right there. As far as our crew report goes, we can just transmit this, so we might as well. So this vehicle has quite a bit on it actually that was pretty much unnecessary. If I didn't have all this extra weight in the Science Junior and maybe even some of these extra components down here, I probably could have made it to orbit, potentially, but nonetheless. Still, I think a successful little mission to test out everything. So we're gonna swing on down. Jebediah is gonna come smashing into the atmosphere here pretty soon. So what we need to do is go ahead and stage the lower portion of this vehicle, and then we're simply just gonna turn SAS off, and this should should mostly orient itself in a fashion that protects it from the heat. I might actually turn that on just a little bit so that we get some control. No, actually, we don't have any control. So we're at the whims of aerodynamics. Hopefully that parachute doesn't get too hot. I think it should be okay, though. Looks like our vehicle is wobbling around until it stabilizes. See what our ablator is like. It's taking a little bit of a beating, which is expected, but it's doing its job at these velocities. Jebediah is experiencing upwards of 10 Gs, and he's doing just fine, because apparently Jebediah is a badass. And just like that, look at that. I don't think there's going to be any Kerbal deaths today, boys. Alright, well, nothing you haven't seen before. We'll let Jebediah just drift on down to the surface. Looks like he's going to land in whatever little sea this is, like a little bay of sorts. That's kind of cool feature. And when we get to be about, I think, 5,000 or so meters, go ahead and hit this parachute. And just like that, Jebediah has become the first Kerbal to leave the atmosphere and return safely. I'd consider that a small step in our space program, but, you know, still an important one. Jebediah keeps sliding down the edge of this thing. I have a feeling eventually he's just going to fall in the water. So, before that happens, we're going to go ahead and sign... Nope, not going to happen before I can sign off. I'm Kyle, this has been that one playthrough of Kerbal Space Program, and I hope to see you in the next episode. Have a nice swim, Jed.